"Mom, let's be honest here," my daughter said while examining her perfect manicured nails. "You can barely remember what day it is. You're a danger to yourself. Signing everything over to me isn't just smart. It's the only option you have left." She sat across from me in my own kitchen. Her expensive perfume invaded the space like poison gas. That blazer she wore probably cost more than my monthly pension. "I mean, look at this place," she continued with a dismissive wave at my home. "It's falling apart, just like you. Don't you think it's time to admit you need help?" Her voice was sugar-coated arsenic, sweet on the surface, deadly underneath. I sat there quietly, hands folded, face neutral, letting her words wash over me like cold seawater. She leaned forward. Her hazel eyes glittered with something that definitely wasn't love. "I've already spoken to an attorney," she said confidently. "We can have you declared incompetent by next month. This can be easy, Mom, or it can be difficult. Your choice." The threat was naked now, bare. She wasn't even pretending anymore. And that's when I realized something beautiful, something powerful, something she'd never see coming. She thought I was weak, confused, defeated. She had no idea I'd already found my late husband's hidden will, the brass key, the legal documents that proved everything was mine alone. The letter warning me this exact moment would come. She didn't know I'd been playing confused on purpose for weeks, gathering evidence, recording conversations, building my case like a teacher preparing the perfect lesson plan. She didn't know that her own attorney, the one she trusted, was actually working with me, documenting every lie, every manipulation, every ugly word. My daughter thought she was hunting a wounded animal. She didn't realize she'd walked into a trap set by someone who'd spent 4 decades outsmarting people half her age. I looked at her expensive clothes, her cold eyes, her smug certainty, and I smiled, gentle, confused, exactly what she expected. "That sounds very complicated, dear," I said softly. "Maybe I should think about it." Her jaw tightened. Impatience leaked through her performance. "Mom, there's nothing to think about," she said more sharply. "You're not capable of thinking clearly anymore. That's the whole point. Such honesty, such breathtaking cruelty." But I just nodded, meek, helpless, playing my role perfectly. Because here's what Lauren was about to learn. You don't underestimate a woman who spent 40 years teaching teenagers, who knows every trick, every scheme, every desperate play for power. The game had already begun. The pieces were moving. And my daughter, my greedy, cruel, foolish daughter, was about to discover that the weakest-looking player on the board was actually the one holding all the cards. She just didn't know she'd already lost. I need to tell you how it started. Really started. Because the betrayal didn't announce itself with thunder. It crept in on fog. I live in Gloucester, Massachusetts, in a wooden house that groans when the wind comes off the harbor. The place has been mine for 37 years. My husband Robert bought it when the paint was fresh and our daughter was still in diapers. Now the paint is peeling. The shutters need replacing. The porch sags a little on one side, but it's mine. Every creaking board, every salt-stained window, every memory soaked into these walls. Or it was mine, until Lauren decided she wanted it more than she wanted a mother. The signs were there. I see that now, little things I dismissed as concern. She started visiting more often 6 months ago, every weekend, sometimes twice a week. I thought she missed me. Thought maybe she was finally making time for her aging mother. Stupid. So stupid. She'd ask about my bills, whether I was keeping up with payments, if I needed help organizing my finances. At first it felt caring, attentive. the daughter I'd always hoped she'd become. Then came the comments about my memory, gentle at first, almost teasing. "Mom, you told me that story already," she'd say with a patient smile, except I hadn't. I never repeated myself. I kept careful track of conversations the way teachers do, but she'd insist, so confidently I'd start doubting my own mind. That's gaslighting, by the way. I learned that term from my church friend Patricia, making someone question their own reality, their own sanity. Lauren was building a narrative, planting seeds, creating witnesses who'd later testify that poor Evelyn was declining, needed intervention, needed her daughter's protection, clever, methodical, absolutely ruthless. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in October. The fog was so thick I couldn't see the harbor from my kitchen window, just gray emptiness where water should be. I was sorting through mail when I found it, an envelope addressed to me, official looking, legal. Inside was a petition for guardianship, filed by Lauren Grace, seeking authority over my person and estate due to my alleged incompetence. My hands shook as I read it, not from fear, from rage so pure it felt like ice in my veins. She'd already filed, already started legal proceedings, all while visiting me with casseroles and concerned smiles. The petition listed reasons: memory loss, confusion, inability to manage daily tasks, poor judgment, all lies, documented lies. With dates and examples I knew were fabricated, but they sounded believable. That was the terrifying part. She'd crafted a story that would convince a judge who didn't know me, who'd just see a 75-year-old widow living alone in a deteriorating house. I sat at my kitchen table for an hour, just staring at that document, feeling everything I thought I knew about my daughter crumble into dust. Then something shifted. That teacher instinct I'd honed over 40 years kicked in. I'd dealt with bullies before, manipulators, kids who thought they were smarter than everyone else, who thought rules didn't apply to them. I knew how to handle this, not with emotion, not with confrontation, but with documentation, evidence, strategy. I folded the petition carefully, put it in a drawer, sat back down, and started planning. First, I needed to understand what I actually had, what Lauren was after, what legal protections existed. Robert had always handled the finances, kept meticulous records. I knew he had documents somewhere, important papers he'd mentioned but never explained. The basement. It had to be in the basement. That's where he kept everything that mattered. I made myself a cup of tea, Earl Grey. The ritual calmed me, helped me think clearly. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows like it wanted in. The house creaked and settled around me. Familiar sounds, comforting sounds. This was my home, mine. I'd raised my daughter here, buried my husband from here, lived every significant moment of my adult life within these walls. Lauren thought she could take it, thought I was too old, too confused, too weak to stop her. She was about to learn what every student I ever taught learned eventually. Mrs. Grace doesn't lose. She just waits for the right moment. Then she wins so completely you wish you'd never challenged her in the first place. I finished my tea, rinsed the cup, set it in the drainer. Then I headed down to the basement to find out exactly what weapons my husband had left me. The stairs were steep, narrow. My knees complained, but I ignored them. Pain was just information. I'd learned that from years of standing in front of classrooms. The basement smelled like damp and memory. Old wood, mildew, the ocean salt that worked its way into everything in Gloucester. Robert's workbench sat against the far wall, still organized exactly as he'd left it. Tools hung on pegboard, coffee cans full of nails and screws, his tackle box gathering dust, And behind it all, a dark green metal box I'd seen 1,000 times but never opened. I pulled it out, heavier than expected, solid. The lock was simple, but I didn't have a key. I searched the bench, the drawers, the shelves, nothing. Then I remembered Robert's coffee can, the one labeled nails in his blocky handwriting. I dumped the contents, real nails scattered across the bench. And there, wrapped in an old handkerchief, a brass key small enough to miss if you weren't looking carefully. It fit perfectly. The lock clicked open. Inside were papers, legal documents, bank statements, and on top, a letter in Robert's careful script. "My dearest Evelyn," it began. I started reading, and everything changed, because Robert had known. Somehow he'd known Lauren would do this, had prepared for it, had built protections I never realized existed. The house was in my name only, not joint with Lauren. The accounts were protected. Everything documented and legal and unbreakable. But more than that, Robert had left me a message, a strategy, a way forward. "Truth is strongest when it stays quiet," he'd written. I read that line 3 times. Understanding blooming like spring flowers after a long winter. I didn't need to confront Lauren, didn't need to rage or cry or beg. I just needed to watch. Wait, let her think she was winning while I built my case. Then strike, decisively, when she least expected it. I folded the letter carefully, put everything back in the box, locked it, returned it to its hiding place. When I climbed back up those stairs, I was different, stronger, clear. The fog was lifting outside, harbor coming back into view, lighthouse visible again in the distance. I looked at that lighthouse for a long time, standing firm, weathering storms, warning ships away from danger. That's what I'd be now, a lighthouse, standing in my truth, shining my light, warning my daughter she was heading for rocks. And if she didn't change course, if she kept sailing toward destruction, I'd let her wreck herself. Then I'd watch from the shore while the tide carried the pieces away. Because that's what lighthouses do. They stand, they shine. They don't chase after ships too foolish to heed their warnings. Lauren wanted a war? Fine. She'd get one. But it would be fought on my terms, with my weapons. And by the time she realized what was happening, it would already be over. I smiled then. For the first time since finding that petition, a real smile. Not the confused old lady performance I'd soon perfect. My daughter thought she knew me. Thought 40 years of teaching elementary school made me soft, gentle, easy to manipulate. She'd forgotten I also taught middle school for 5 years, the toughest kids, the ones who thought they could outsmart anyone. I'd handled 12-year-old master manipulators. Lauren didn't stand a chance. The game was on. The pieces were moving, and I already knew how it would end, with me still standing in my house by the fog, free, dignified, triumphant, and Lauren learning the hardest lesson of all. Never underestimate a woman who spent her life teaching people that actions have consequences. Class was in session, and my daughter was about to fail spectacularly. The basement smelled like my marriage. Damp wood, old paper, and secrets kept too long. I hadn't been down there in months. The stairs felt steeper than I remembered. Each step creaked under my weight, like it was judging me for waiting this long. But that guardianship petition had lit something inside me. A kind of cold fury I hadn't felt since I caught a student cheating on finals 30 years ago. You don't forget that feeling. The moment you realize someone thinks you're foolish enough to miss what they're doing. The metal box sat exactly where Robert left it, pushed behind his old tackle gear and a stack of National Geographic magazines he never threw away. It was smaller than a shoebox, dark green with rust creeping along the edges like age spots on skin. I pulled it out. Heavy. The weight surprised me. My hands shook as I set it on the workbench, not from weakness, from something else. Anticipation, maybe, or dread. The lock was simple. I'd seen it 1,000 times, but never tried to open it. Robert always said he'd show me what was inside when the time was right. Then he died of a heart attack while buying groceries. The time never came. I searched the workbench drawers. Nothing. Checked the shelves. Nothing. I was about to give up when I saw it. A coffee can labeled nails in Robert's blocky handwriting. Inside were actual nails, and underneath them, wrapped in an old handkerchief, a brass key no bigger than my thumbnail. It fit perfectly. The lid opened with a sigh like it had been holding its breath for 10 years. Inside was less than I expected, and more than I could have imagined. No money, no stock certificates, no hidden fortune that would solve everything, just papers and a letter. The papers were legal documents I didn't understand at first. Property deeds, bank statements, insurance policies, all organized with the kind of precision that made me miss Robert so badly my chest hurt. He always labeled everything, always kept backup copies, always prepared. The letter sat on top, my name written in his careful script. "My dearest Evelyn," it began. I unfolded it slowly. The paper was thick, expensive. He must have chosen it specially. "If you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I didn't explain this in person. I knew you'd tell me I was being paranoid. Maybe I was, but I also knew our Lauren better than you wanted to admit." My throat tightened. I kept reading. She came to me 3 years ago asking about the house value. She wanted to know about inheritance timelines, estate liquidation. She used words like optimization and tax efficiency. She sounded like a real estate consultant, not a daughter. I didn't tell you because you would have defended her. You would have said I was being unfair. You've always seen the little girl who brought you dandelions. I saw the woman who stopped calling unless she wanted something. The words hit like slaps, true ones. So I changed things, Evelyn. I made sure everything goes only to you. Not joint ownership with Lauren, not a trust she could contest, just you. The house, the accounts, the pension, all in your name alone. The papers in this box prove it. But here's what matters most. If she's pressuring you, if she's trying to make you doubt yourself, if she's using words like incompetent or unsafe or incapable, don't believe her. You're the sharpest person I ever knew. You taught children to think clearly for 40 years. Trust that gift. And remember this. Truth is strongest when it stays quiet. I read that last line 3 times. Truth is strongest when it stays quiet. What did that mean? I set the letter down and looked through the papers again, more carefully this time. Everything was dated and notarized. Everything was legal and binding. Robert had built a fortress around me, and I never even knew. The property deed showed my name only. No joint ownership, no beneficiaries listed except through my will, which I'd written years ago, leaving everything to Lauren anyway. Oh, God. That's what she was counting on. Get me declared incompetent, become my guardian, wait for nature to take its course. Then inherit everything as my only child. Except Robert had made it harder than that. These papers showed I was completely sound when everything was transferred to me. Any lawyer could prove Lauren had no automatic claim. She'd have to prove I'd lost capacity after Robert's death. That's why she needed the guardianship petition. That's why she'd been visiting more often lately, mentioning my forgetfulness, suggesting I seemed confused. She was building a case against her own mother. I sat down on Robert's old stool. The basement suddenly felt colder. But Robert's letter kept echoing in my head. Truth is strongest when it stays quiet. He wasn't just telling me I was right. He was telling me how to fight, not with confrontation, not with accusations, but with patience, with silence, with the kind of strategy that looks like surrender until the final move. I thought about my teaching days, the way I'd handle a classroom bully, never attack directly. That just makes them defensive. Instead, you watch, you document. You let them think they're winning while you build your case. Then when you finally act, it's decisive. It's irrefutable. It's over. Lauren thought she knew me, the sweet, trusting mother who always believed the best in people, who avoided conflict, who signed whatever papers were put in front of her. What if I became exactly that person? What if I played the role she'd already written for me? The idea took shape slowly, beautifully. I'd pretend. I'd forget things. I'd seem confused. I'd let her think her plan was working. Meanwhile, I'd find out exactly what she was plotting. I'd document everything. I'd build my own case. And when the moment came, I'd show her that underestimating an old woman was the stupidest mistake she'd ever made. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed help. Someone she trusted. Someone who could pretend to be on her side while actually working with me. Ella Morgan's face came to mind, the attorney Lauren had mentioned, the one who'd supposedly help with my estate planning. Lauren trusted her because Ella had handled some rental properties for her before. But Ella and I had known each other for years. We served on the church council together. She'd come to Robert's funeral and held my hand through the whole service. She was sharp as glass and twice as clear about right and wrong. Would she help me? Would she understand what I was trying to do? I gathered the papers carefully, put them back in the box, locked it again, wrapped the key back in its handkerchief, and returned it to the coffee can. Everything looked untouched, exactly as Robert left it. But I was different. I'd gone down to that basement as a confused widow. I came back up as something else, a teacher preparing a lesson, a mother preparing for war, an old woman who just remembered she was never as helpless as people assumed. The fog was rolling in when I climbed back upstairs. I could hear it in the muffled silence that meant the harbor had disappeared. Good. Fog was useful. It hid things. It made people think they couldn't see clearly. Let Lauren think I was lost in the fog. Let her think I couldn't find my way. I knew exactly where I was going, and I knew exactly how this would end. I just needed her to keep thinking she'd already won. The first time I pretended to forget, it felt like betraying myself. Lauren had called that morning. She wanted to come by for lunch, bring some paperwork for me to review. Just routine stuff, she said in that bright voice that now sounded like fingernails on a chalkboard. I made sandwiches. Tuna salad the way she used to like it as a child. Then I stood in my kitchen and practiced being confused. I said her name wrong, Laura instead of Lauren, just once. Casual, like my tongue had slipped. She arrived at noon wearing her real estate uniform, crisp blazer, expensive handbag, smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mom," she said warmly while kissing my cheek, "you look tired. Are you sleeping okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart," I told her softly. Then I called her Laura. Her eyes flickered, just for a second, but I saw it, that little spark of satisfaction. "It's Lauren, Mom," she corrected me gently, like I was a child who'd gotten my spelling wrong. "Oh, goodness," I said with a confused laugh. "Of course it is. I don't know where my mind goes sometimes." We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where she'd done homework, where we'd had birthday parties, where I'd comforted her through breakups and job losses and all the small tragedies of growing up. Now it was a battlefield, and I was pretending to surrender. She opened her folder, pulled out papers covered in legal language I absolutely understood but pretended not to. So, Mom, she began in that patient tone people use with the elderly. These are just to make sure everything's organized, in case something happens, for your protection. I picked up the papers, squinted at them like the words were swimming. What do they say, honey? My eyes aren't what they used to be. She leaned forward, smelling of expensive perfume and impatience. It just gives me power of attorney, she explained smoothly, so I can help manage your bills and doctor appointments, make things easier for you. You won't have to worry about anything. Power of attorney. The words that would give her control of everything. I set the papers down, let my hand tremble slightly. That sounds complicated, I said uncertainly. Maybe I should think about it. Her jaw tightened, just barely. Then the smile returned. Of course, Mom, she said sweetly. Take your time, there's no rush. But you know how you've been forgetting things lately. Last week you couldn't remember where you put your glasses. And you told me the same story about Mrs. Henderson 3 times. I hadn't done either of those things. But I nodded slowly like I was trying to remember. Did I? I asked quietly. You did, she lied with such confidence I almost believed her myself. That's when I understood how long she'd been planning this, how carefully she'd been laying groundwork, mentioning my forgetfulness to others, creating a narrative, building her case brick by brick. Well, I said with a heavy sigh, maybe you're right. Maybe I do need help. The relief on her face was ugly, naked greed dressed up as concern. I'm just worried about you, Mom, she said while reaching over to pat my hand. I want to make sure you're safe. That's all I've ever wanted. Liar, I thought, but I smiled at her like I believed every word. She stayed another hour, talking about how she'd handle my finances, how she'd find me a nice assisted living facility, somewhere with activities and people my own age, somewhere I'd be happier. Translation? Somewhere she could warehouse me while she sold my house. I listened, nodded, asked confused questions, let her explain things to me like I was simple. And inside, I took notes, mental ones, every lie, every manipulation, every moment she thought she was fooling me. When she finally left, I stood at the window and watched her drive away. My hands were shaking for real now, but not from weakness. From rage so pure it felt like cold fire in my chest. Then I called Ella Morgan. The phone rang 3 times. I almost hung up. What if I was wrong? What if Ella wouldn't help? What if this whole plan was foolish? But then she answered. Evelyn? Her voice was warm, surprised. It's so good to hear from you. How are you? I need your help, I said quietly, and I need you not to ask questions until we meet in person. Silence. Then, when and where? Your office, tomorrow morning. And Ella, Lauren can't know. Another pause. Longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, sharper, more focused. 9 o'clock, she said firmly. Come to the back entrance. I'll make sure we have privacy. I hung up, feeling something I hadn't felt in years, hope, and its dangerous cousin, anticipation. That night, I practiced in the mirror, forgetting names, losing my train of thought, looking confused. I'd taught teenagers to act in school plays for decades. I knew how to coach a performance. Now I was directing myself. The trick was subtlety. Too much and Lauren would get suspicious. Too little and she wouldn't take the bait. I needed to be just confused enough to seem incompetent, just forgetful enough to seem like a problem, but not so far gone that she'd panic and rush her timeline. I thought about Robert's letter. Truth is strongest when it stays quiet. This was my truth now. I wasn't losing my mind. I was using it. Every bit of intelligence I'd spent 40 years developing. every trick I'd learned, managing classrooms full of kids who thought they could outsmart me. Lauren thought she knew me. The nice mother, the sweet widow, the woman who always saw the best in people. She'd forgotten I was also the teacher who never let a cheater get away with it, who noticed everything, who waited until she had proof before she acted, who understood that the quietest students were often paying the closest attention. I was that teacher again now, watching, waiting, building my case. The next morning I wore my oldest cardigan, the one with a small stain on the sleeve. I left my hair a little messy, no makeup. I wanted to look exactly like what Lauren expected, a woman slipping, struggling, needing help. Ella's office was downtown, above the pharmacy where I got my prescriptions. I took the back stairs like she'd said. My knees complained, but I ignored them. She was waiting at the top, dressed for court in a sharp gray suit, but her face was soft with concern. "Come in, Evelyn," she said gently while guiding me to her private office. "Tell me everything." So I did. I told her about the guardianship petition, about the metal box and Robert's letter, about Lauren's plans and my own, about the performance I'd started and why I needed an ally. Ella listened without interrupting. Her expression went from concern to shock to something harder, something that looked like professional fury. When I finished, she sat back in her chair, steepled her fingers, looked at me with eyes that had seen plenty of family law ugliness, but still found this particularly disgusting. "You want me to pretend to work with her," she said slowly, "while actually working with you, to document everything she does and use it against her when the time comes." "Yes," I confirmed quietly. "Can you do that?" She smiled then. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a lawyer who just found a cause worth fighting for. "Ethically," she said carefully, "I can represent you without disclosing that fact to your daughter. I can let her believe I'm a neutral party. And I can absolutely document every attempt she makes to manipulate or defraud you. In fact," she leaned forward, "I'm obligated to protect you if I believe you're being financially exploited. So you'll help me," I said. Not a question, a confirmation. Ella reached across her desk, took my hand in both of hers. "Evelyn," she said fiercely, "I'm going to help you take your daughter apart piece by piece, legally, thoroughly, and in a way she'll never see coming. Because what she's doing isn't just wrong, it's elder abuse. And I don't tolerate that." I felt something crack inside me then. The fear I'd been carrying, the loneliness, the betrayal. I wasn't alone anymore. I had an ally, a co-conspirator, a friend who understood exactly what was at stake. "Thank you," I whispered. My voice broke slightly. "Don't thank me yet," Ella said with that sharp smile. "Thank me when we win. Now let's talk strategy." We spent 2 hours planning. Every detail, every possibility, every way Lauren might move and how we'd counter. When I finally left through the back stairs, I felt lighter, stronger, like I'd been carrying Robert's metal box on my shoulders and finally set it down. The fog was clearing as I walked home, the harbor coming back into focus, the lighthouse visible again in the distance. I thought about that lighthouse, how it warns ships away from danger, how it stands there year after year, weathering storms, still shining. That's what I'd be now, not a confused old woman, not a victim waiting to be rescued, a lighthouse standing firm, warning my daughter that she was heading for rocks, and if she didn't change course, she'd wreck herself against them. I'd make sure of it. The trap was set 3 weeks later on a Tuesday that smelled like rain. Lauren had called the night before, excited, almost giddy. She'd found the perfect assisted living place for me. Beautiful grounds, wonderful staff, activities every day, and they had an opening. "We just need to finalize the paperwork, Mom," she'd said brightly. "Get everything transferred so I can handle the deposits and fees. It'll be so much easier for you." Translation: sign over control so I can sell your house and lock you away. I'd agreed, meekly, gratefully, like a woman who'd finally accepted she couldn't manage alone. She arrived at 10, dressed for success in navy blue, carrying a leather portfolio that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. I met her at the door wearing my confused old lady costume, stained sweater, mismatched socks, hair uncombed. I'd even put my reading glasses on top of my head and spent 5 minutes pretending to look for them. The performance was working. I could see it in her eyes, that mix of pity and impatience, that certainty she was doing the right thing. Ella arrived 15 minutes later, right on schedule. Lauren had called her a week ago, asked her to prepare the power of attorney documents, make them official, notarize everything. Ella had agreed readily, professional, efficient, exactly what a real estate consultant would want in an attorney. What Lauren didn't know was that Ella had prepared 2 sets of documents, the real ones that protected me, and the fake ones we'd use today. "Good morning, Mrs. Grace," Ella said formally as she entered. "Lauren, thank you for including me in this process." Lauren smiled, warm, confident. She thought everyone in the room was on her side. We settled at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd fed Lauren as a baby, where she'd blown out birthday candles, where we'd laughed together before greed poisoned everything. Now it was an execution site, except Lauren didn't know she was the one being executed. Ella spread papers across the table, official-looking documents with legal language and signature lines. She explained each one in that careful attorney voice: powers of attorney, healthcare proxies, property transfer authorizations. I listened with a confused expression, asked simple questions, let Lauren answer them for me like I was too dim to understand. "It's for your own good, Mom," Lauren said patiently while patting my hand. "This way I can make sure your bills get paid, that you get proper care, that everything's handled. Such tender concern, such devoted lies." Ella produced a pen, expensive, heavy, the kind that made signatures feel important. "Mrs. Grace," she said seriously, "do you understand what you're signing?" "I think so," I said uncertainly. "It's so Lauren can help me." "Right?" Ella glanced at Lauren, then back at me. "That's correct," she confirmed neutrally. "These documents give your daughter authority to manage your affairs." Lauren leaned forward eagerly, like a wolf watching wounded prey. I picked up the pen. My hand shook, not from acting this time, from genuine emotion, because this moment mattered. This moment would determine everything. I signed, slowly, carefully. My maiden name from 60 years ago instead of Grace. It was a small mistake, the kind a confused person might make, but legally it invalidated everything. Lauren didn't notice. She was too busy watching with barely concealed triumph. Ella noticed. Of course she did, but her face stayed professionally blank. "There," I said with a tired smile. "Is that everything?" "Almost," Ella said smoothly. "I just need to verify a few details for the notarization. Mrs. Grace, can you confirm your current legal name?" "Evelyn Grace," I said clearly, "and you signed as." Ella pretended to check the document. "Evelyn Morrison, your maiden name." Lauren's smile froze. "Oh, Mom," she said with forced patience, "you need to sign your current legal name. Let's do it again." I blinked at her, confused, apologetic. Did I do it wrong? "I'm sorry, honey. I get so mixed up." "It's okay," Lauren said tightly. "Just sign it again, correctly this time." But here's where the plan got interesting. because Ella had deliberately prepared documents with an error, a small clause that contradicted another clause, the kind of mistake that would make them unenforceable even if signed correctly. Lauren didn't know enough about law to spot it. She just knew I'd signed wrong and needed to fix it. We went through the charade again. This time I signed correctly. Lauren practically glowed with relief. Ella gathered the papers, tucked them into her portfolio. "I'll get these filed by the end of the week," she said professionally. Lauren stood, hugged me, told me how proud she was that I was being so mature about this transition, how happy I'd be in my new home, how she'd visit all the time, more lies, sweet poison dressed as comfort. After she left, I stood at the window and watched her drive away, probably headed to a realtor already, ready to list my house, count her money, celebrate her victory. Ella stayed behind. We waited until Lauren's car disappeared around the corner. Then we looked at each other and smiled. Real smiles this time, not the performance kind. "She has no idea," Ella said with satisfaction. "Those documents are worthless. Even if I filed them, which I won't, they'd be thrown out by any judge who looked at them for 5 minutes." "What happens now?" I asked, my voice steadier than it had been all morning. Ella sat back down, pulled out a different folder, this one thick with papers. "Now we document," she said firmly, "every conversation, every attempt to manipulate you, every lie she tells. We build a case that shows exactly what she's been doing. And when we have enough—" She paused. "We take her to court." My stomach clenched. Court. Making this public. Exposing my own daughter as someone who tried to steal from her mother. It felt brutal, necessary, heartbreaking. But Ella wasn't finished. "There's something else you should know," she said more gently. "Lauren's been talking to other people, your church friends, your neighbors, telling them you're declining, that she's worried about you, that you need professional care. She's been building her case too," I said quietly, "creating witnesses who'll say I'm incompetent." "Exactly," Ella confirmed. "So we need our own witnesses. People who can testify that you're perfectly sound, that Lauren's the one being dishonest." "The church ladies," I said suddenly. "Grace Fellowship. They've known me for 30 years. Ella nodded approvingly. "Perfect. Can you arrange to spend time with them? Let them see you're completely capable? Maybe even mention some of what Lauren's been saying?" "I can do better than that," I told her. "I can host our next fellowship meeting. Here. They'll see how I manage my home, how I organize everything, how clear my mind is." Ella smiled that sharp lawyer smile again. "Do it," she said decisively. "And Evelyn, don't hold back. Let them see what's really happening. We need people outraged on your behalf." The fellowship meeting happened 4 days later. 6 women ranging from 65 to 82. We'd been meeting monthly for years. Prayer, support, gossip dressed as concern. They knew me, really knew me. The way you only know people after decades of shared history. I served tea and homemade cookies. We discussed church business, upcoming events, who needed meals or visits. Then Margaret Henderson, who'd taught Sunday school since God was young, looked at me with worried eyes. "Evelyn, dear," she said carefully, "Lauren mentioned you've been having some memory trouble. Are you all right?" The room went quiet. 5 other faces turned to me with concern. This was the moment. I could deflect, change the subject, protect Lauren's reputation, or I could tell the truth. I set down my teacup, looked at these women who'd been my friends for 30 years, and I told them everything, not dramatically, not emotionally, just factually. The guardianship petition, the property grab, the lies about my mental state, the fake concerned daughter act while she planned to warehouse me and sell my home. I showed them Robert's letter, the legal documents proving ownership, the timeline of Lauren's increasing visits, and manufactured concerns. By the time I finished, Margaret was crying. Angry tears. The others looked shocked, furious, protective. That girl, Margaret said with such venom I almost felt sorry for Lauren. That ungrateful, greedy girl, after everything you did for her. "What can we do?" asked Patricia Williams, a former nurse who understood medical evaluations. "Do you need us to testify, write statements? We'll do whatever helps." "Actually," I said carefully, "that might be exactly what I need. Would you be willing to tell a court what you've observed? That I'm perfectly competent? That Lauren's claims are false?" They agreed instantly, all 6 of them, ready to stand up for me, ready to call out elder abuse when they saw it. Ella had said we needed witnesses. Now we had them. Credible, respectable, impossible to dismiss as confused or biased. But we still needed one more thing. Hard evidence of Lauren's intentions. Something undeniable. That came 2 weeks later, in a phone call I recorded with Ella's guidance and a device she'd provided. Lauren called while I was making dinner, excited again. The assisted living place was holding the spot, but they needed a deposit. $10,000 right away. "I don't have that kind of money just sitting around," I said uncertainly. "That's a lot." "Mom," she said with exasperation bleeding through her concern, "that's why I need the power of attorney finalized, so I can access your accounts, move things around, make this happen for you." "But those papers didn't work," I said, confused. "Ella said there was a problem." Lauren's voice went cold, sharp. "Then we'll do new ones, better ones." "Mom, you need to trust me. I'm trying to help you." "I know, honey," I said meekly. "It's just scary. Giving up control. What if I need money for something?" "You won't," she said firmly. "I'll handle everything. You won't have to worry about bills or expenses or any of it. Doesn't that sound nice?" "What about my house?" I asked quietly. Silence. Then, "We'll deal with that when the time comes, one step at a time." "But you're planning to sell it," I said, still playing confused but pushing harder. "Aren't you, once I'm in the facility?" Another pause. Longer. When she spoke again, her voice had an edge like broken glass. "Mom," she said slowly, "that house is too much for you. You can't maintain it. Can't afford the upkeep. It makes sense to sell. To use that money for your care. You understand that, right?" There it was, on tape. Her admission that she planned to sell my home, use my money, all dressed up as doing what's best for me. "I understand," I said softly. "You're right. You're always right, honey." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and shook. Really shook. Because hearing her say it out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. My daughter wanted to steal my life, my home, my independence, my dignity, and she thought she'd get away with it because I was old, because people underestimate old women, because society teaches us to be quiet and grateful and cooperative. Well, I'd been quiet, I'd cooperated, I'd played my part perfectly. Now it was time for the curtain to fall, and Lauren was about to discover that the helpless old woman she'd been manipulating was actually the director of this entire production. Ella listened to the recording with a grim expression. Then she looked at me with something like pride. "This is enough," she said quietly. "Combined with the guardianship petition, the fraudulent documents, and your witnesses, we have a case, a strong one." "What happens next?" I asked, though I already knew. "Next," Ella said firmly, "we file a protective order, block her access to your assets. Then we schedule a competency hearing. Let a judge evaluate you personally, see that you're perfectly capable. And when Lauren realizes what's happening, she leaned forward. She'll try to fight back. She'll make accusations, call you unstable, try to discredit our witnesses. And that's when we show the judge everything. I finished. The recordings, the timeline, the proof that she's been lying all along. Exactly, Ella confirmed. We let her talk herself into a corner. Then we show that the only person acting incompetently here is her. When? I asked. When do we do this? Ella smiled. That dangerous lawyer smile I'd come to appreciate. Tomorrow, she said decisively. We file tomorrow. By Monday, Lauren will have been served, and by the end of the month, she'll be sitting in a courtroom realizing she just destroyed her relationship with her mother, her reputation, and possibly her real estate license, depending on what else we uncover. I should have felt triumphant, vindicated, ready for justice. Instead, I felt tired and sad and older than my 75 years. Because even though Lauren deserved this, even though she'd earned every consequence coming her way, she was still my daughter, still the baby I'd rocked to sleep, still the child I'd loved unconditionally. But love without respect is worthless, and trust without honesty is poison. She'd chosen this path, chosen greed over family, manipulation over honesty. Now she'd learn what happens when you underestimate a woman who spent 40 years teaching children that actions have consequences. Class was officially in session, and my daughter was about to fail her final exam. The courtroom smelled like old wood and broken promises. I sat in the front row wearing my best dress, navy blue with pearl buttons, the same one I'd worn to Robert's funeral. It felt appropriate somehow. Another ending. Another goodbye. Lauren sat across the aisle with her attorney, a young man in an expensive suit who kept checking his phone. She wouldn't look at me. Hadn't looked at me since the protective order was served 2 weeks ago. That day had been ugly. She'd shown up at my house screaming, demanding to know what I'd done, why I was ruining everything. How could I be so ungrateful after all she'd tried to do for me? I'd stood on my porch and said nothing, just watched her rage like a storm breaking against rocks. When she finally ran out of words, I'd spoken quietly. You tried to steal my life, Lauren. What did you think would happen? She'd stared at me then, really seeing me for the first time in years. And the look on her face wasn't anger anymore. It was shock, genuine shock that I'd figured it out, that I'd fought back, that the confused old mother she'd been manipulating had outsmarted her completely. Now we were here, in front of Judge Patricia Morrison, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and eyes that miss nothing. The hearing started simply. Ella presented our case, the guardianship petition Lauren had filed, the fraudulent power of attorney documents, the timeline of increasing manipulation, the recorded phone calls. Then came the witnesses. Margaret Henderson testified first, spoke about knowing me for 30 years, about my sharp mind and careful management of church finances, about how I'd recently hosted fellowship and organized everything perfectly. Patricia Williams testified next, former nurse. She described my cognitive function in medical terms, clear memory, logical reasoning, no signs of dementia or decline. 4 more church ladies followed, each one calm, credible, absolutely certain I was being victimized by my own daughter. Lauren's attorney tried to discredit them, suggested they were biased, too old themselves to be reliable witnesses, friends who'd lie to protect me. Judge Morrison shut that down fast. These are respected community members, she said icily. Their testimony carries weight. Move on. Then Ella called me to the stand. I walked up slowly, not from confusion, from nervousness, because this was it. The moment everything hinged on. If the judge believed I was competent, Lauren lost. If she had any doubt, this could drag on for months. Ella asked me simple questions first: my name, address, how long I'd lived there, what I'd done for a living. I answered clearly, precisely, like I was teaching a class. Then she asked about my daily routine. I described cooking, cleaning, managing bills, attending church, reading, gardening, a full life, an independent life. Mrs. Grace, Ella said seriously, do you understand why we're here today? I do, I confirmed steadily. My daughter filed for guardianship claiming I'm incompetent. She tried to get power of attorney through fraudulent means. She planned to sell my home and place me in a facility against my will. The words hung in the courtroom like smoke. And why do you believe she did this? Ella asked gently. I looked at Lauren then, really looked at her. She was crying, silent tears running down her face, but I couldn't tell if they were real or just another performance. Because she wanted my house, I said quietly, the property value. My late husband made sure everything was in my name only. She couldn't inherit until I died, so she decided to have me declared incompetent instead. That's not true, Lauren burst out desperately. I was trying to help. She was forgetting things, getting confused. I was worried. Judge Morrison's gaze swung to her. You'll have your turn, Miss Grace. Sit down. Lauren's attorney stood quickly. Your Honor, my client acted out of genuine concern for her mother's welfare. Any mistakes in documentation were unintentional. This is a family matter being blown out of proportion by... The judge held up one hand. I've heard enough, she said firmly. Mrs. Grace, she looked at me. I'd like to ask you some questions directly if that's acceptable. Of course, Your Honor, I said respectfully. She asked me about current events, who the president was, what year it was, what season we were in. Simple orientation questions. I answered everything correctly. Then she asked harder questions about managing finances, about medical decisions, about what I'd do in various emergency scenarios. I answered thoughtfully, carefully, like I was taking a final exam that actually mattered. Finally, she set down her pen. Mrs. Grace, she said with something like respect, you are clearly competent, fully capable of managing your own affairs. There's absolutely no grounds for guardianship here. Relief flooded through me so strong I almost cried. But the judge wasn't finished. She turned to Lauren with an expression that could freeze fire. Ms. Grace, she said coldly, what you attempted here borders on elder abuse. You filed false claims, attempted to manipulate legal documents, undermined your mother's reputation in the community, all for financial gain. Lauren was crying harder now. Your Honor, I didn't mean... She started desperately. I don't care what you meant, Judge Morrison interrupted. I care what you did. And what you did was attempt to exploit a vulnerable senior. The fact that she turned out not to be vulnerable doesn't excuse your actions. She shuffled papers, made notes. The courtroom was silent except for Lauren's muffled sobs. I'm dismissing the guardianship petition with prejudice, the judge declared firmly. Mrs. Grace retains full control of her person and property. Additionally, I'm ordering a restraining order. Ms. Lauren Grace is not to contact her mother or come within 500 feet of her property without explicit written permission. Lauren's attorney stood quickly. Your Honor, that seems excessive. Does it? The judge's voice could have cut glass, because from where I sit, Ms. Grace has proven herself willing to lie, manipulate, and defraud her own mother. I see no reason to believe she won't continue trying. The restraining order stands. She banged her gavel. The sound echoed like a gunshot. We're adjourned. Lauren tried to approach me in the hallway. Her attorney grabbed her arm, reminded her about the restraining order. She stopped, but called out anyway. "Mom, please," she said brokenly. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was just scared. Scared of losing you, of not being able to help. Such pretty lies. Even now." I looked at her for a long moment, memorizing her face, wondering if I'd ever see her again. Then I said quietly, "You were scared of losing my house, not me. There's a difference." I walked away, Ella beside me, the church ladies surrounding me like a protective wall. Outside the courthouse, the sun was shining, bright and clean. The fog had burned off completely. Margaret hugged me tight. "You did good, Evelyn," she said warmly. "You stood up for yourself. Robert would be proud. Maybe. Or maybe Robert was up there shaking his head that it had come to this, that our daughter had become someone capable of such cruelty. But he'd also prepared me, given me the tools I needed, the hidden will, the legal documents, that final message about truth staying quiet. He'd known. Somehow he'd known this day would come. Ella drove me home. We didn't talk much, didn't need to. The silence was comfortable, victorious. At my door, she paused. "You okay?" she asked carefully. This was a win, but it's still hard. Losing your daughter, even when she deserved it. "I'm sad," I admitted honestly. "But I'm also free, and that matters more." She hugged me. "Call if you need anything," she said firmly. "Anytime, day or night." After she left, I walked through my house, still mine, still under my control. I made tea, sat at the kitchen table, the same table where this whole thing had started, and I thought about forgiveness, whether it was possible, whether I even wanted it. Lauren had hurt me, betrayed me, tried to steal everything I had left, but she was still my daughter, still the baby I'd loved, still capable of change, maybe. A week later, the first postcard arrived. Plain white card, Lauren's handwriting. "Mom," it said simply, "I'm in therapy, trying to understand why I did what I did. I know you don't want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know I'm working on myself. I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry." I put it in the metal box with Robert's letter. Didn't throw it away, didn't respond, just kept it. More postcards came, one every few weeks. Updates, apologies, slow acknowledgement of what she'd done wrong. I read each one, saved each one, said nothing back. Because forgiveness isn't something you rush. It's not something you give just because someone asks. It's something that grows slowly, like trust, like healing. Maybe someday I'd respond. Maybe someday we'd rebuild something. But not today. Today, I was content with my freedom, my dignity, my home. I started walking by the lighthouse again, early mornings when the fog was just lifting, the light still spinning, still warning ships away from danger. I thought about that lighthouse often, how it weathered storms, how it stood firm, how it kept shining even when nobody was watching. That's what I'd become. Not a victim, not someone who needed rescuing, but someone who'd weathered the storm and come through stronger. The church ladies visited often. We had fellowship at my house most months now, drinking tea, sharing stories, supporting each other the way women our age do. They never asked about Lauren. They understood some wounds take time, but they celebrated me. Celebrated the fact that I'd fought back, that I'd proven old women aren't helpless, that wisdom and patience and quiet strength can defeat cruelty. I became a bit of a legend at church, the woman who outsmarted her greedy daughter, who proved age doesn't mean weakness. Young women started asking my advice about difficult family members, about standing up for themselves, about recognizing manipulation. I told them what Robert taught me. Truth is strongest when it stays quiet. Watch, listen, document. Wait for the right moment, then strike with precision. Don't rage, don't cry, don't beg, just act decisively with all the intelligence you've spent a lifetime developing. They listened, took notes, called me months later to say it worked. They'd protected themselves, stood their ground, won their battles. And I felt proud, not just of them, but of myself, for becoming the kind of person worth learning from. Some nights I sat on my porch and watched the harbor, the boats coming in, the fog rolling out, the endless cycle of tide and time. I thought about Lauren, wondered where she was, who she was becoming, whether she'd ever really understand what she'd done. I thought about Robert, missed him fiercely, thanked him for preparing me, for seeing what I couldn't see. Mostly I thought about dignity, how easy it is to lose, how hard to reclaim, how precious it becomes as you age. Nobody was going to take mine again, not family, not strangers, nobody. I'd fought for it, earned it back, and I'd guard it like the lighthouse guards the shore, steady, bright, unbreakable. The fog rolled in, the light kept spinning, and I sat there in my weathered house by the sea, finally at peace. Not because I'd won, but because I'd remembered who I was, a teacher, a widow, a survivor, a woman who stayed quiet until it mattered, then spoke with a voice that couldn't be ignored. That's my story. That's how I reclaimed my life. And if it helps even one person recognize what's happening to them, recognize they have power they forgot they had, then every painful moment was worth it. We're stronger than people think. We seniors, we quiet ones, we supposedly fragile souls. We're lighthouses, all of us. We just have to remember to keep shining.